I'm going to say things straight to your face. If today you're thinking about giving up, you might be quitting at the worst possible moment. Because even though we see the market taking another hit, going through another bloodbath, and still continuing, this is exactly when the crypto market is capitulating. This won't last forever, that's for sure. At some point, there's going to be a switch because yes, there's capitulation on the crypto side, but on the other hand, gold and silver are wiping out trillions in a single day. We might be on the verge of a switch. In any case, I'm convinced we're in a window of opportunity and maybe the last one before institutions really step on the gas. And I truly believe that. And in fact, we're currently working on this strategy. We're discussing it, we're debating it within the club. Yesterday, we had another 4-hour live session. That's about the average length. And we're getting ready and already preparing the strategy for the coming weeks. Because it's not during a bull run that you make money, it's in a bear market, it's during a downturn, it's when everything is red, everything is dark, and there's total disinterest. I'm telling you this today, and I'll keep telling you over the next few weeks, but if you've already thought about quitting or it's crossed your mind, this might be the worst possible time to do it. Because everyone is panicking, but the institutions on the other hand are still going, and as we can see on-chain, they're accumulating and getting ready for something. And the on-chain signals are actually starting to point toward a possible rotation. We're going to talk about that today. And above all, today we're going to witness a complete change of direction from the Fed. And when I say complete, I mean it. Because Trump announced just this morning the future replacement for Jerome Powell. It was supposed to be next week, but in the end, he actually announced it this morning. We're going to see what impact, what effect this could have on the American economy. And you'll see it from a completely different perspective. Let's get started. Starting with what has set the market on fire a bit in the past few hours, we'll build up gradually, as usual, because this is not just a minor tremor. It's a real bloodbath. We're talking about over $1.7 billion liquidated in 24 hours and nearly 280,000 traders wiped out. And the important point, actually, is that it wasn't the shorts, meaning those who were betting on the market going down. It was the opposite. It was those who were betting long with leverage. All right? So it's those who believed in that famous, the rebound is guaranteed and we're heading north for sure. And they're the ones who got completely wiped out in a matter of minutes. You can see it right here. But what's shocking is that it wasn't just crypto that suffered. That's what's most impressive. At the same time, gold and silver made the same move, and it was completely violent. Because in the metals market, there was a massive purge. We're talking about $5 trillion wiped out in 24 hours. The question we can ask ourselves is why we saw such a brutal crash in so-called safe haven assets. In reality, it was a perfect chain of different factors. First, in the metals market, there were traders betting at 50 times, 100 times leverage, basically in kamikaze mode, as you can imagine. And as soon as things started to pull back, it triggered a cascade of margin calls. Next, we have Trump, who just announced a new candidate. And this isn't a typical candidate because it's Kevin Walsh. He wrote us a long piece here, but I'll explain in a few words what it means. He's talking about overhauling the Fed. Kevin Walsh wants to overhaul the Fed with the idea of a new so-called Treasury-Fed Accord to redefine the relationship between monetary policy and public finances. And he has a very particular perspective because, according to him, the explosion in productivity linked to AI is disinflationary. So that could potentially open the door to much more aggressive rate cuts than the market expects. So that's actually a good thing. But be careful, because it's not just an all-liquidity process. That is to say, we're not just going to inject liquidity. On the contrary, because he also criticizes the Fed for implicitly supporting Wall Street through its balance sheet. And he wants a massive reduction of the balance sheet. So basically, he wants, and yes, he's pro-growth, but he's anti-QE, even though we've just called an end to QT. Remember, that was on December 1st, 2025. And actually, this combination could completely change the way markets behave in 2026. That's important, and I'll talk to you about that a bit more in depth. But while everyone has their eyes fixed on Trump, there's been a huge breakthrough that just happened in crypto. Because the Senate Agriculture Committee, as I mentioned to you, has just approved the famous Crypto Market Structure Bill. And it was a close call, if I can put it that way, because the vote was 12-11. So the Democratic amendments were not adopted, but the main part of the bill survives, so it's moving forward. So concretely, this further expands the role of the CFTC over what are called digital commodities. And this could Finally, take Bitcoin and other tokens out of the gray area. So the next step will be the Senate in plenary session. And with clarity comes the end of the Wild West. And above all, it opens the door to institutional investors. So that's actually good news, even if it will take time for it to fully materialize. There's another point of tension, which is the famous shutdown. I'll talk to you about that as well, because according to the latest information, the Democrats have reached an agreement with Trump to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. This would avoid a shutdown as early as this weekend, so that removes a fairly immediate risk in a market that's already extremely sensitive. But obviously it's still political, it's still fragile, and everything can change overnight. And it can also be renegotiated just as quickly as it's announced. So, ASUS, I'll also talk to you about that in the daily update. And here, we also have a very strong signal from the crypto industry because Binance has announced that they will convert all of their funds. Seifu. So we're talking about $1 billion here, from stablecoins to Bitcoin. This transition will take place over 30 days. So it will take some time, and symbolically it's huge because in fact the CFU was created to protect users in case of extreme events. And now it becomes entirely backed by Bitcoin. So good or bad news, they're taking a big risk. So even in the midst of total chaos, we have one of the biggest players, if not the biggest, doubling down on their conviction in Bitcoin. And over the coming weeks, so it's actually pretty gutsy, if I may say so. We also have right here this movement between asset classes that's starting to show up in the data, because as we mentioned, we're entering a critical zone for gold. Because we have what's called a buy climax. You can see it here, and it's confirmed. Then afterwards, we had a sharp correction. And a few hours later, Bitcoin follows. So this isn't a prophecy, it's just mechanics, the mechanics of flows, if you understand it. It's that when gold reaches excess, there's a purge. Then things stabilize. And then liquidity starts to be reallocated toward risk. And this is where it gets interesting because we might be at, or at least approaching, the key turning point. That famous rotation we've been waiting for between gold and silver, which soared and is now correcting, and Bitcoin, which will eventually play its part. But it's not impossible that the beginning is closer than we think. So stay tuned. So quite a lot of information today between the shutdown, the Fed, and the law that barely passed. Let me know in the comments. How would you phrase it? Right now, tell me what you think about the market, because I'm really interested in your opinion. I'm also linking you to this video if you want to start generating passive income from the crypto you own. It's always something, especially in times like these. A bit of a lean period, a bit bleak right now. Don't hesitate to apply to the club if you don't have a strategy for the coming weeks. And if you want to benefit from my expertise as well as the expertise of the coaches who are also part of my club, take advantage of it now. It's a small group, a tight-knit community. We're moving forward. We're trying to predict. We're one step ahead of the market. So take advantage of it. Make the most of this expertise. I'll see you tomorrow for a new video. Until then, take care. Ciao.